tomorrow a year ago. Tomorrow is my 1 year anniversary of my graduation, and I think for me, midwifery education was a process, and I think that during that education, we went to the next slide. It can go back. Yeah. I think throughout my education, I was kind of craving another narrative, more information. And I think that once I did a minor program in the UK where we went more into critique, it really opened my eyes into what midwifery also can be and how I can kind of combine my politics with my work. And I think that has brought me a lot. And it's still a process. It's still something that's continuously changing. I learned so much this past year by doing midwifery, and also, yeah, learning things, finding out what kind of practice fits me and what kind of clients work with me, and how to approach that, how to find those clients, how to take care of marginalized people. I think those were questions that have been on my mind this past year. And in that process, I've been reading a lot, thinking a lot, doing trainings. And today I want to start the day with this lecture where I try to take you along to things that have inspired me in that journey, and some concepts that have been really inspirational for me to work towards change. And I think that now we can go to the second slide, because I wanted to ask the question, why futurist perspectives? Because that's the focus of this day. And I think I wanted to move forward from this place of critique we have been in this week, where we have been going really in depth into several subjects. And I wanted to see or give some other perspectives in how to move from that critique into change, and how can we move forward from that. And one of the concepts that have been really inspirational for me is emergent strategy. I read the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, and I wanted to read this quote from that book, from chapter 9 to you, because that well, it helps you understand the why of this day. So there she's saying that I've been in movement spaces for a long time, and we have a way of doing things that is so steeped in critique that I have often wondered if we could strangle movement before it could blossom. Sometimes I think we put up the critiques to excuse ourselves from getting involved. And sometimes we do it to protect our hearts from getting broken if it doesn't work out. Critique alone can keep us from having to pick up the responsibility of figuring out solutions. Sometimes I think we need to liberate ourselves from critique, both internal and external, to truly give change a chance. And I think I read that, and I read this book when we already were doing critical midwifery studies collectives. And it was funny to me because during my studies, I was really craving for this critique. And there was Adrienne that said, actually, we need to also move away from it, or use this critique really to bring change, and how to do that. And I think since I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think that's why I wanted to focus this day on futurist perspective, so that we don't only stay in that critique, but we also try and move forward and bring change. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'll go further into emergent strategy, I'm using the definition by the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute, and they explain it as three pathways. The first is emergent strategy is a path that invites us to think about change as a constant state of being and how to align and direct it towards that which affirms and creates more life. A path that runs counter to the competitive power over urgency culture of capitalism and shifts material conditions. A path that is apparent throughout nature in species that have adapted collectively and can be applied to change transformative justice movements. And that adaptation is a really big part of emergent strategy. So one way it is grounded in the writings of Octavia E. Butler, and on the other way, it's really grounded in what we see in nature and how which patterns we see in nature and how we can translate that in the way we make change. So what species adapt in what way and collectively move, and how can we translate that to the ways we can build movements. The next slide, please. I wanted to read this quote by Octavia E. Butler because I think it's beautiful and it really translates to this work. And it is, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Octavia E. Butler. And this is also, it's just very, it really translates to what emergent strategy is, because it's all about how to be in the right relationship to change. And for example, to give an example, in the Netherlands, we have been, how do you say that? There has been a lot going on in policy in how midwifery is organized. And what happens is that people get scared of that change. And, oh, Virginia, can you mute, please? Thanks. And what happened is that that policy actually did came true, but because there was, how do you say that? There was fear of that change, we are not actually adapting and not working with it. And I think that how to be in the right relationship with change is a really interesting concept if we talk about futurist perspectives, because things are going to change, and the way that we are in relationship with that is really going to, how do you say that, is going to impact the outcome of that change. Next slide, please. The next concept I want to discuss is the Rest is Resistance movement by the NEP Ministry, with the NEP Bishop, Tricia Hersey, as its thinker. And I came in contact with this, I think, through social media, and it really touched me. And I think last year I followed a workshop with her, which really influenced me, and I use it a lot in the way I do midwifery now. And I wanted to share the tenets of the NEP ministry with you. So what they say is that rest is a form of resistance because it disrupts and pushes back against capitalism and white supremacy. Our bodies are a site of liberation. NEPs provide a healing portal to imagine, invent, and heal. Our dream space has been stolen and we want it back. We will reclaim it via rest. Wait 1 second. Rodante, if every time you move your mouse, the screen, there's happening things. Yes. I don't know if it's
I see
necessary.
it, but the problem is that I also have to let people in.
Shall I otherwise share my screen? Maybe that's better.
Or maybe Linda, maybe you can let the people in, and then I will stay away from the mouse.
Is that doable?
Yes, wait. It's
Okay.
so every time I touch something, it changes.
Exactly.
Okay, I will not touch it
I
anymore.
was really distracted by it.
Wait, I will just mute myself.
Thank you. Yeah, so these are the tenets of the net ministry. And restless resistance, it means a lot to me because the way midwifery is shaped where I work, but I think in a lot of places, rest is not really easy to come by. It's a very intense job. It's the workload is humongous. The work pressure is big. I think that throughout the entire world, you see high numbers of burnout, people leaving the profession. I mean, the UK is in a crisis. There is a care crisis in itself. And how do you find your place in all that to still find rest? And why is rest that resistant that we need? She already starts that it disrupts and pushes back against capitalism. And it can feel very hard to do that when you're already in that system. And Tricia always talks about the grind. It is this grind we are all in that makes that it's very difficult for us to find rest. And she links that lack of rest with the impact that that has on our ways of imagination and how that influences the way our movements are shaped and the way we are not really able to bring actual change. For example, she says that because we are stuck in that grind, we are still working from those oppressive tools. Audre Lorde talks of the master's tools in that amazing essay that also is very dear to me. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. I would, stimulate you to read that. And what Tricia says is that because we're still stuck in that grind, it's very difficult to come loose of those master's tools. And because we're still kind of forced to keep using that, we're not really bringing real change. And she says that when we start to really rest, and that will also influence the way we are able to imagine again. And she uses an example of, for example, her grandmother who always just lie down and closed her eyes for 10 minutes. And that she said that that really gave her the ability to basically survive in an oppressive system. But also Harriet Tubman, who also used, who had prophecies of how she could help people escape those plantations. And they say that that also happened in her dreams. So that's why in this movement, dreaming is a really important concept. And I'm going to move forward on that. So that dream space that has been stolen by living in that grind of capitalism, that is what we want back and what we want to reclaim. And that's going to happen through rest. Can I have the next slide, please? So she shared this quote with us that I want to share with you because I think it's beautiful. These are really important questions to ask ourselves. And it's a quote from M. Sean Copeland's book. And the questions are: how do we care for our own bodies as sacred? How do we cooperate to craft a world in which all bodies can thrive? Next slide, please. So how to use that dream space? I think Tourmaline is a filmmaker and a community organizer for Black, trans, queer, gender non-conforming and disabled communities. And I read this amazing article that I still have to share with you about this concept of freedom dreaming that she uses a lot. And in that article, she says, freedom dreams are born when we face harsh conditions, not with despair, but with the deep knowledge that these conditions will change. That a world filled with softness and beauty and care is not only possible, but inevitable. And I love that because it is so hopeful. And I think that's really what I wanted to share with you today, because we've been talking a lot about how midwives are being oppressed and how the difficulties of this profession and this work. But for me, this really opens up such a hopeful message and such a hopeful way of looking at change and the future, really. Can we go to the next slide? So, to freedom dream, Tourmaline uses these 3 questions to come back to every time. The first question is, what does the dominant culture have that we want? The second, what does the dominant culture have that we don't want? And the third, what do we have that we want to keep? And what she does is that she comes back to these questions over and over and over again. And you can use it as meditation or you can journal. And what she said in the article was that when I give myself permission to slow down like this, and particularly when I wonder what we already have that we want to keep, what I always notice are the small things, or I should say, what seem like small things, but really are the big things, the everyday acts of liberatory glamour, care, and openness that keep us alive. I notice how much I am already surrounded by the world I dream of. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. I wrote my own freedom dream, and I would like to read that to you. It's on the next slide. So, my freedom dream. I dream of a midwifery that is self-conscious, that knows its strengths and its weaknesses, and is self-critical towards those. I dream of a midwifery with midwives that are a true representation of the beautiful variation of humans on this earth. I dream that those midwives are being in community with the ones they care for, and that their communities grow strong and liberated. I dream of midwives that lay down the master's tools and shape new tools of transformation and liberation. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, to quote Outer Lord again. I think I had a final quote, lots of quotes today. Next slide, please.
I don't think there is a next slide.
Oh, then I forgot to add that one. Well, then I'm just going to close it off like this. So I hope that by sharing with you these other perspectives of looking towards future and change, because I think future is change, change is future. I'm hoping that I can offer you a way, a more hopeful way to look at how we are going to process all this wisdom and knowledge and critique that we shared over the last week, and how to bring that into our work when we are going to go back to work tomorrow, to our theory, to our research, but also into the movements that we are going, the movement we are going to be as CMS, and how can we also as CMS use these theories and these concepts. I'm really, really enthusiastic for the rest of the day. Next is going to be an amazing talk by Monse Olmos, who's going to share with us what we can learn from Mexican indigenous midwifery. We're going to be with Sophie Lewis, and after Audra Mars Lord, another Lord, that's amazing. And last but not least, Sabia Wade, who's going to talk to us about emergent strategy and transformative justice. And I don't know if there's anybody that has questions for me or wants to share something. I'm seeing here in the chat a question. Where in the book can we find a quote about critique? It's in chapter 9. I don't know the page for sure, but I would just read the chapter and then you'll find it probably. Restless resistance, such a generous and affirmative presentation. Oh, lovely, thank you. So Monse will join us in about 7 minutes, quarter before, I thought. So if you want, please grab a drink. P, I need a drink after talking this much. And then we will be back quarter before 3. Thank you. I see I got a question after all. Let me come back to. So Deirdre asked me, how do you imagine the community that you propose for the midwives of being with those they care for and with? So I think that's a really good question. I think that's something for me that I'm still thinking about and reflecting on. And I think that there's probably not one way to it for everybody. But I think for me, what I'm looking at now is that I'm looking to find my community. And I think that also, I think finding your community is maybe also a resistance towards this society that's very neoliberal and individualistic. And I think that by finding community and being in community with others, we're also resisting that culture. And I think that will really influence the way midwives work, or that it also the way it feels like to midwife, because sometimes it feels a bit uncomfortable to only be of service. I think at one of my deepest points where I was working a really busy practice, I think I said out loud, I was just in bed after working nonstop, and I was like, I'm only giving, who's giving something to me? And I think that that for me is a big part of, or an advantage of being in community with, to care but also be cared for. And I think that's missing a bit now. Now I'm gonna have a break. Oh, Neron, you wanted to say something?
Hi. Okay. Oh, hi. I just had a really nice present. Okay, that's my son. Ja, sofort. Es gibt gleich Essen. I guess I'm gonna talk in the chat. I'm sorry. This is the early morning hours, and I'm of service to my kids. Yeah, I gotta put it in the Discord. Sorry.
It's all good. Jeff, hi.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I really appreciated that, and particularly the dream aspect. Could you say a little bit about where love fits into your vision of community and dreaming and all that sort of stuff?
I love that question. Yeah, it's a really big part of it. It's a really big part of it. Rodante, I already see Rodante smirking because she knows how much. Yeah, I think that for me, All About Love by Bell Hooks was a really, really big influence in the way I do midwifery. And yeah, it's a big impact, a really big influence on why I think community is so important. Because I think that there's then you need to share this. I think that if you're doing midwifery within a community basis, there is more space for love. And now, because it sometimes almost feels like a transaction or a service only, it feels like there's not much space for that, or it almost feels awkward for me to actually want to love my clients. And I think that that's also something. So now, because I work as a caseload midwife, so I work one-on-one with people, and I have a meetup with them before we decide to work with each other for the pregnancy. And now I also started to just explain this. This is the kind of midwife I am, and I like to be in relationship with you more than just a transactional care relationship, because it is also sometimes awkward for people, because I think in a lot of ways care is you're learned to be distant. Doctors are distant. So here's me wanting to be in a relationship with you. It needs a bit of an introduction. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have 2 minutes left, and Monse is already with us. Amazing to see you.